Good evening. I'm Jonathan Higgins,
I'm Rich Carlson.
and we are the Scanner Guys. Good evening, everyone, and we hope you're having a great evening. We want to do a special shout out at the top of this broadcast to our very own Chris Schultz that watches each and every week. Happy birthday, Chris.
Happy birthday, my friend.
We hope that you have a great birthday. We're looking forward to those photos that you're going to send us from the train show. We're looking forward to seeing those. I'm sure there's going to be some great layouts, so we'll be able to see some trains operating. But we really appreciate you, Chris Schultz. You've been watching our show religiously, both shows practically.
Yeah,
Train
from the
Aficionado
start. Yeah.
and the Scanner Guys. We appreciate you tuning in each and every week. A special birthday shout out to you, Chris. We've got a great show tonight, Rich. I mean, we haven't covered SD cards at this level.
No, not to the level we're going to get into tonight.
So we're going to take a deep dive, as our friend Will likes us to do. Hopefully he's watching tonight. We're going to talk about SD cards. The whole thing with this broadcast was an email from a listener that was saying, had a whole bunch of questions about how the recording works on the SD card. We have a slide specifically for that. Rich and I are going to banter about it quite a bit, so you have an understanding of that as well. So, yes, Joe, no SD card for the 125 AT. 125 AT.
Has that been discontinued yet?
No, I don't think it has been discontinued, but I'm sure Bearcat Joe will confirm that at some point. But yeah, it's not a show without talking about the 125 AT. So we're looking forward to tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, rolling into the broadcast this evening. We're looking forward to this topic of discussion. So let's dive into the slideshow presentation. Let's see here. I got to trying to remember what I'm doing here. Here we go. And go to here. All right. So there's our topic of discussion, all about SD cards. So let's dive into that. If you're watching us for the first time, make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to our social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at The Scanner Guys. And then, of course, check out our website, thescannerguyshow.com. While you're there, you can purchase the shirts that Richard and I are wearing.
Hopefully not as big as I have.
Yep. So the Scanner Guys shirts are available there. And so many other things. So definitely check out our website, thescannerguyshow.com, for t-shirts, coffee mugs, tote bags, and even a hoodie is all available on our website as well. And also check out our newsletter. Make sure you sign up for that.
We got to get Scanner Guys water bottles.
Yeah, Scanner Guys water bottles as well. So make sure you sign up for our newsletter. We're going to be sending some emails. And as you know, we have an inside track with Scanner Master. Wink, wink, hint, hint. So you may get tipped off first before the Scanner Master email blast goes out. So definitely sign up for the newsletter. And as always, anytime that you purchase from Scanner Master, down below in each one of these broadcasts is an affiliate link. When you purchase anything from Scanner Master, definitely use the affiliate link below. We get a little bit of the sale, so definitely help us out. We really do appreciate it.
Need new studio lights.
Yeah, we need. And then, of course, if we're doing Dayton, we may plan some sort of event for Dayton as well. That is still on the table from what I hear. So, which is good. Yeah. And of course, the Scanner Guys hat made an appearance at the NASCAR championship race this last weekend. So,
and the funny thing about it is I forgot to bring mine. I was going to bring it and I forgot it, but Dale's, thank you for wearing it. And it did make its appearance.
Yeah, we do appreciate you, Dale, showing off your Scanner Master gear at the race. And we really do appreciate that. So
we had a wonderful time. And
yeah, because you went to
and the first time I'd been to a NASCAR race.
So you know what? We're gonna tease that. I'll ask you a little bit about what you thought of the race and so on. In the Q&A section of the broadcast. So definitely stick around for that. Let's go right into the slideshow presentation this evening. And let's take a look at a little bit of history of SD cards. Now, did you know before you saw the slideshow what SD stands for?
I did. Just because I have seen this before and I had done some research, but I wouldn't have known it if I hadn't had to do that research for a previous article that I wrote for a magazine. But before that, I had no idea. I thought it stood for SanDisk.
Yeah, well, the thing is Panasonic, SanDisk, and Toshiba all teamed up in order to create the standard of SD cards. And that's very smart for those manufacturers versus each manufacturer having some sort of version of a card.
Well, it's like I had Sony cameras back in the day, and they had their MMC card. And it looked kind of like an SD card, but the size was just different enough. And of course, the pins were off that wouldn't fit in anything other than a Sony camera. So now you can buy an SD card, and it'll fit in a Uniden, it'll fit in a Whistler, it'll fit in my dash cam, it'll fit in this, it'll fit in that. It's ubiquitous. It fits in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's so nice that everything is standard. This evening, if you have any questions, certainly post them in the comments. We will get to those at the end of the broadcast. So certainly post any of your scanner questions in the comments. We would love to answer those, and that'll be coming up at the top of the hour. So back in 2099, that's when the SD card was born. And we see the variations of the SD card right over on the right-hand side. The ones that we're familiar with as scanner enthusiasts are the top one, which shows 2 gig, which is your standard size SD card. And then the one in the bottom, which is the micro SD card, which is the small size of your thumbnail.
Yeah, so here is a good size comparison. So the full-size SD card is about the size of a postage stamp, and the micro SD card is about the size of your pinky nail. And we'll flip them upside down so you can see what the pins look like. And most people, when you buy the micro SD card, it comes with a full-size adapter that you just kind of stick the card in, and now you can use your micro SD card in a full-size slot. So if you've got a TRX2, or if your card reader only has the larger slot, don't throw this little adapter thing away. They are invaluable.
And that's for sure. So it's very important that, you do have some of the tools of the trade, which we're going to go over tonight. So 1999 was when the SD card was born. And then in 2004, the micro SD card was introduced. And that's pretty much standard across many of the scanners, other than the ones that you just mentioned, Rich, which take the full-size SD card.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why Whistler did that, because they came out with the TRX1. Well, the handheld format at that time it evolved from the Whistler. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, you can use that full-size adapter for that. But they came out with the handheld first using the micro card, and then they came out with the mobile version afterwards, and they went to the larger SD card. I don't know why they did that, but they did. So
that's for sure. So we're looking at, a couple of years later in 2010, Uniden releases its first scanner to incorporate the micro SD card and touchscreen. So two things that were revolutionary: the micro SD card and the touchscreen was introduced with the Uniden Home Patrol, which we can see right here on the right. This unit here, which was revolutionary. It was the first scanner that actually had an internal database as well. So 3 major things, history in the making by Uniden.
This is one of the rare revolutionary scanners versus evolutionary. It's right up there with the SDS 100 and maybe something like the Bearcat 780 or the Pro 2004. It was a real big departure from the norms of the past and introduced revolutionary features.
Yeah, that's definitely a good tip, Randy, to keep your micro SD card and its adapter so you will not lose it. Yeah, because you think of it, you saw Rich holding it up. It's a literally very small.
It's
very
tiny.
small.
Yeah, it's tiny. Compare that to my fingernail. It's tiny. And the other one, and the adapter makes it the size of a postage stamp, so it makes it a lot less likely to lose it. And if you put it in a pocket or something like that, if I had a pocket, you're likely to find it. If you put the little micro SD card in there, you're going to lose that little guy. It's tiny.
It's so small. So let's take a look at the next slide. All right, so we've grown a lot in the last was it over 20 years SD card wise?
11 years. Yeah. 11 years.
11 years. I mean, you look at it right here. There's a whole slew of radios. We got, of course, the Home Patrol 1, which was the first generation, the Home Patrol 2, the 436, the 536, the SDS 100 and 200. That's literally in the order of the way they were released.
Right.
And then we had, at the time, GRE PSR 800 and 700. And then Whistler took over for GRE, and a whole slew of variations of the PSR 700 and 800 over a period of time. And of course, the Radio Shack versions of the PSR 700 and 800. So all of these radios incorporate the SD card, whether it be the micro SD card or on the Whistler side or GRE or Radio Shack side, it, for the base unit, has the full size SD card.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I have no idea why they did that. And if anybody knows, please let us know in the comments.
All right, let's take a look at the next slide. Now, here are the radios, the current radios that do not incorporate SD cards. And these are otherwise known by Rich and myself as clean slate scanners. So they're not programmed with anything in it. They're clean slate. Yep. If you buy any of these radios, you need to do the programming or leave the programming to the experts such as Scanner Master.
Yeah, and again, these are the current scanners. And any scanners that were built before 2010 automatically don't have the SD cards, obviously. And there's been a few models here and there introduced in that interim period that didn't have them. But those are the current ones that are being manufactured today.
All right, we're going to continue on with all about the SD cards, and we're going to dive into the next section, which is all about why these scanners have SD cards. Now, this is a simulation of what is basically on your SD card. There's multiple folders. There's a folder for the database. There's a folder where they're stored programming. There's a folder for recording. And if it's a unit in SD card, there's a spot for the firmware.
Yep.
Now, these are the essential folders. There's other things that are on there, but these are the ones that are the most important to us.
If you were to open one of these Uniden or Whistler SD cards within Windows just to peek what's inside the SD cards, feel free to do so, but don't diddle around with the contents of that, because if you move or delete a file or rename a file, you could render that card useless for your radio. And that means you're going to have to either restore it or reprogram it. But there are a lot of different files in there. Some of the naming on them can be kind of arcane, but all those files have a purpose, and all the folders all have purposes on them.
Yes. So let's kind of go into each section. So the database is basically, this is where the internal database for such as radio reference, all the information that you're pulling from radio reference is stored. And this is basically a text file that's in there, which is not basically, probably not readable to us, but the scanner is able to translate it.
And there's good reasons why it's done like that, legal and copyright rules and such. But yeah, the entire database is there. It doesn't take up a whole lot of room, but it's millions of frequencies and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's a text file, so it's a little tiny file on that 2 gig, 8 gig, or 32 gig SD card.
Right.
Now, stored programming. Guess what's there? Favorites list, scan list. Those are all stored there. Yet again, tiny files, not taking up hardly any space.
You can have hundreds and thousands of different favorites lists and not fill up a 2 or 4 gig card. So, they don't take up a whole lot of room.
Okay. Now we've talked about 2 of the folders.
Yeah.
Don't take up hardly any space.
All right.
We're going over to the recorded folder. Guess what? That takes up space.
Yes.
So if you're doing any type of recording, that will take up space. Basically, it's saved as a WAV file.
Right.
So that will take up space. We're going to dive into that a little bit more. That's got its own slide.
Yeah, and that does take up a little more room than the other stuff.
Now, the other thing, another folder for firmware. So when you connect it up to your computer, you're going to update firmware. If there's a firmware edition, guess what's going to happen? It's going to put it right into that folder. And then the next time, let's say if you're doing it with the card reader, the next time you boot up your scanner, it starts up and it's going to say, "Oop," it's going to look in that folder and say, "Oh, this firmware, I need to install it." So it's going to grab that firmware, install it, and then that file will be removed. It'll leave that folder, so it's not taking up any space.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is if it left it there, it would just keep on writing that firmware to the radio every time you turned it on. So the radio automatically deletes that firmware once it's installed into the radio. It deletes it from the SD card.
Yes, and that takes up a little bit more space depending on the firmware edition, but the thing is, it's only on there temporarily.
Yeah, exactly. Like I say, once it's installed in the radio, it gets deleted from the SD card, and it's no longer necessary.
And then, like Joe said, the firmware resides on the radio once it's installed.
Right. Yeah, and you're not going to be able to erase that, from the SD card. So basically, if it finds a valid file format for the firmware on the SD card, it will install it. If it's invalid, if it's renamed or whatever, then it won't install it. It'll just ignore it.
Okay, so let's continue on here. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so how the SD card works. Oh, look at all the arrows. Well, this we're going to switch this to this view so we can see the text. So the SD card is essential for the operation of the scanner. It's going to first look there when it boots up.
Yeah, and if the card isn't there, the radio is not going to turn on. It's just going to, the only thing you're going to see on the display is SD card error. So without that SD card, the radio will not work.
Okay, so basically that covers that. So it checks the to make sure the SD card's there. It's looking towards certain files.
Right.
Now,
you can't just stick a blank card in there. It's not going to work.
So the next thing, so you see there with the arrow, the first thing it's going to do when it boots up is going to look at that firmware folder. Hey, is there anything new in here? If there's nothing new, it's just going to say, okay, nothing in that folder. Moving along. So now what it'll do is it'll check the programming and it's going to see, what it was doing the last time you were powered up. And it's going to say, oh, okay, it was scanning this scan list, or this scan list, or Rich, it's going to say, I was using the database for this particular zip code the last time it was running.
Yep, and whatever it was doing the last time it was on, or I should say that actually whatever it was doing the last time it was on and turned off properly, it will do again.
Yes.
So, and we'll talk about that in an upcoming slide.
But yeah, you can see here. So with the arrows, the first thing it's doing is it's checking the scanner is checking to see if there's an SD card.
Yep.
Then the next thing, it's checking the firmware folder. And then the next thing, it's checking programming. So it's looking at the database and stored programming and seeing, okay, these things were on the last time that the radio was properly turned off.
Yeah.
So
yep,
let's
absolutely
go into the next slide. So this is the main topic of why we did this show, and we basically said we're going to cover it all. Now, the question was asked through email, recording scanner audio. Is it one big wave file? Does it take, does it just record the radio transmissions? It'll just record the radio transmissions. If Rich, you remember those old, tape recorders, and they had what was it? I can't remember the abbreviation. The voice activated
VOX. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Voice operated. So what'll happen is when the radio breaks squelch, it'll record that audio. And when the squelch is closed again, that will end that file. So you'll have a bunch of different wave files, and the file name is going to be the date and time format. So it'll say, because the radio can only hear one thing at a time. So on November 10th at 6:22 p.m. or 1822 and 43 seconds is the start of that file. That will be the name of that file.
Yeah, which is absolutely correct. It'll just do that. And that's a very important thing, Rich. When you're using the recording feature, you want to make sure that the date and the time is set correctly on your scanner. Because if you are looking for an incident that took place, let's say 8 o'clock in the morning, you'll be able to look through your recordings relatively quickly. If the time is and the date's way off, it's going to be a son of a gun to be able to figure out, okay, so what you're going to be searching through a whole bunch of wave files.
Yeah, I had that. We've had that issue with some of our stuff before. We had an old camera system that the date and time was all messed up. We couldn't get it set. We had a heck of a time trying to find videos. So, like you said, make sure your date and time is set properly on your scanner if you're using the recording feature. And that's pretty much the only reason the scanner has a date and time setting.
Yes. All right, let's take a look at the next one here. Data is always being saved. It's constantly doing this. So anytime that you edit a favorites list on the fly, let's say you go into the menu and you say, oh, crap, I stored this talk group. They're always talking all the time. What you can do is you can go into that favorites list, find that particular item and remove it off the favorites list, or you can hit the whole button, hit the E button, and edit that particular channel right then and there and remove it completely out. So let's say you do a little bit of programming on the fly. It's going to be saving to that SD card. The other thing, recordings. If you're recording, it's going to be constantly saving. The replay feature, constantly saving for a short period of time. It's going to be able to save that so you'll be able to listen back to X amount of time worth of recordings that have just occurred. Channel lockouts, another thing, saving, especially if you're doing the permanent lockout, the double tap of that lockout, and you don't want to hear it ever again, it's going to have to save it. The scanner settings, whatever you have set for settings on the scanner is constantly being saved. Now, what we found, Rich, when we started selling the 536, now this was the radio that kind of hinted us not to do a certain thing, especially in a vehicle with the ignition, with the kill switch. And Rich, tell us what we found and what we recommended to customers after we found out what was going on.
So I actually found this once myself. I was listening to the full database while I was traveling. And as I was driving, I was hitting that avoid button, locking out a bunch of channels. And then I stopped at the gas station, got gas, turned the car back on, and all those darn channels that I had spent all that time avoiding were back. I'm like, oh, man. So then I made sure next time to turn the radio off before I turned the ignition off so that all those avoids get written to your SD card. Because if you don't allow the radio to actually write those to the SD card by turning the power off with the power switch, all those avoids get lost in the ether out there. And the same thing with some of the other settings. And if you're doing recording or have the replay feature turned on, you're eventually going to corrupt your card because of the amount of read-write activity that's going on. And if you interrupt that impolitely by killing the power without turning the radio off and allowing it to do its final cleanup, that card's going to get a corrupt file on there, and you're going to have to refresh, reformat, erase the card, and start all over again.
Yeah, very much so. So you want to be definitely careful if you're using this in a mobile setting.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll notice if any of you have like a 536, a 436, an SDS 100 or 200, you'll notice when you shut the radio off, it doesn't just shut off right away. Usually the screen will go into a little bit of a shutdown. And in that screen, it's basically making its final save. So
it'll say write to SD card, please wait. And it takes 2 seconds.
Yeah. So definitely make sure, you're careful with that. If you've done a lot of things to the radio in the vehicle and you want to make sure it saves as just an added precaution while you still have the vehicle running, turn the radio off, let it do its thing, and then kill the ignition at that point. Just so you cover your bases. But if you want to avoid, having SD card errors, definitely turn off the replay feature. We found that raises a lot of havoc with it because it's constantly recording and you may get it midway into recording.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a 536 in my car now for 8 years. And since I turned off the replay option, I just turn the thing on and off with the ignition. The only time I actually go in and turn it off is when I have done a whole bunch of avoids that I want to save. But most of the time, I just turn it on and off with the ignition. I have not yet had a card corruption since I've turned off the replay option.
Yeah, knock on wood on that.
Yeah.
All right, we will continue on to our next slide, and a little bit different with the Whistler TRX 100, 200, and all those radios on that side of the fence. Protocols are almost the same as the Uniden, but the Whistler does stand out a bit with some exemptions. Of course, Rich, what makes these so different than the Uniden radios?
Well, the main difference is that the Whistler does a very extensive integrity check when you turn the radio on. And it's checking every sector on that card over and over and over again. So the larger card you have, or the higher capacity card you have, the longer that integrity check is going to take. And that's a big complaint that we get about the TRX 1 and 2 scanners, is that it takes so darn long for the radios to turn on. If you use a smaller card, that integrity check takes a lot less time, and the radio will boot up that much faster. Also, the second thing is the Whistler scanners don't load the firmware from the SD card like the Unidens do. So it will actually load the firmware directly from the USB cable while it's connected to the EasyScan software. And as we mentioned before, the TRX2 and the other Whistler mobiles use the full-size SD card, not the micro. And yes, you can use that little mini to micro adapter, so you can actually use a micro card in your TRX2. Just make sure you use that little adapter.
All good things with that. So keep that in mind if you're owning any of the Whistler GRE scanners, or even those Radio Shack models are going to be about the same that are equivalents to those models.
Yeah, it was the 668, and then there was the Pro 17, I think it was, or Pro 18. There were a couple of those older Radio Shack scanners. If you have a Pro 668, kind of an aside here, because it's no longer supported because Radio Shack is gone, you can actually send those into Whistler for what they call a legacy upgrade. and they will upgrade it to a Whistler WS1080. They actually change out some of the hardware and update the firmware. And once that is done, it will now be supported by the Whistler version of the software, and which is still updated and usable. So and you can get that from Whistler's website. Finding the Pro 668 software is kind of a hit or miss solution. So if you've got a 668, send it to Whistler. They'll upgrade. I think they charge about $70. And now you've got a WS1080, which also adds DMR to your radio.
All right. This is handy if you're using, you're ejecting the SD card or micro SD card out of your computer. This little adapter, which you can pick up at Best Buy, is not very expensive. Will allow you to be able to read and write to the computer. It'll connect right up to a USB connection on your computer. It's much faster connecting up to one of these versus using your scanner at this point, your scanner becomes a big SD card reader.
Yeah,
when it's
but
connecting
a slow one.
Yes. And this is handy as well if you have, like Rich and I both have 536s in the vehicle. So the only way we would be able to do it, if we left it in the radio, is one, pull the scanner out of the vehicle, or two, eject it out, bring the SD card in, and program it.
Or bring your laptop out to your car. And the two solutions are not ideal, but thankfully Uniden put the SD card right there on the front panel of the radio, which it couldn't be any easier to access. So that is a really simple way of doing it. So go to Best Buy, go to Walmart, go someplace and get one of these little card readers. You can get the one like that, like Jonathan had pictured there. You get one of these. Plugs into a regular USB cable, plugs into your computer. You can buy docks for your computer, and even some computers have SD card readers built into them.
Yeah, I mean, definitely take advantage of it, especially if you're using this mobily. And that's going to be a huge help. So definitely have that purchased and then use it for all your projects, especially, the other thing too, is if you're into photography.
Yeah. And
sometimes the SD card slot is not in the best place in the world on the computer. So you may want to purchase one of those as well. So it would be a dual function.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a dock for my Mac Mini that fits underneath the computer, and it's got a full size and a micro SD card slot right on the front of the thing. So I just pop it right in, pop it right out. And if I'm doing 10 or 15 cards at a time, for all my scanners and my backup cards, I can just boom, 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 boom. It's a lot faster than trying to find cables to plug into the radios. And the read and write times are much faster on the SD card reader.
All right. What brings us to our next segment, replacing and reformatting an SD card. So a lot of you are do-it-yourselfers. So this is going to be the section for you if you're looking to add an existing SD card or you're trying to replace an SD card. So we're going to dive into this section of the slideshow presentation now. So we've been getting a lot of questions in the comments about size. Do I go big? Do I go small? Do I go size is the big question.
Size matters.
Size matters, apparently. So if you're not going to do any recordings whatsoever, never do any recordings.
Yeah.
A 2 gig, an 8 gig SD card is fine.
Yep.
You don't need something massive. Remember, when we went through earlier in the program, we went through the key folders and we talked about each one. Size doesn't matter on the database. Size doesn't matter on the favorites list. Size doesn't really matter too much on the firmware. The size mattered on the recordings.
All right.
So if you're doing a lot of recordings, max storage we would recommend is 32 gigs.
Yeah, and 32 is the largest that's supported by the manufacturers of the scanners. And in reading the comments, some of our readers have been using larger cards than 32s up. I've seen up to 128 on some of these. I've heard of other people having issues with 128 gig cards or 64 gig cards. We know 32 always works. Anything above that, there are some issues which we're going to address in an upcoming slide as well. But a larger card will work, but there's really no need for it unless you're doing a bunch of recording.
Yeah, you really don't need a larger card. Now, the scanner guys and Scanner Master prefer using the SanDisk Ultra SD cards.
Yeah.
Now, these are, of course, high-quality SD cards. And if you guys were paying attention back at the beginning of the slideshow, SanDisk was one of the key players in creating these cards. So you know they're going to make these cards work really well because it's essentially a part of their brainchild.
And I'm pretty certain that the SD name of the card was chosen before they chose Secure Digital. They probably named it an SD card because SanDisk was probably the lead company, and then renamed it to Secure Digital when the other companies came on board with it. So that SanDisk, we have never had a problem with SanDisk. I have SanDisk cards in most of my radios, and they work great. I've never had one fail on me.
Yeah, so the key thing is to probably purchase a high-quality SD card. We're going to give a shout-out to one of the best companies to buy these SD cards is B&H in New York. They have these cards at a reasonable price. Now, keep in mind, you're going to pay top dollar if you go to Walgreens, CVS, even Walmart or Target.
Yeah.
They'll charge you an arm and a leg for these. If you don't mind ordering it online, the best place I would say is B&H Photography. They're phenomenal. They have these high-quality SD cards in stock, and you can just purchase either the micro or the full-size SD card. Yeah. We strongly recommend it. The other option is if you don't trust yourself creating a new SD card or doing the work yourself, you can always order a replacement from Scanner Master.
Yeah, and when you buy the one from Scanner Master, it will be updated with the complete database, the most recent version, the most recent firmware version for the radio that you buy it for, plus a favorites list for the county or counties that you choose, and it will be the SanDisk Ultra 8 gig micro SD card. And that is the card that we use, and again, that we have had we have never had a problem with those. So that's the one you're going to get when you buy it from Scanner Master, and that's how it's going to be programmed.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about it. If you don't have the time or you don't want to stress about it, definitely B&H Photography, in New York City is the best place to be able to buy them. They're affordable. What I'll do is anytime that I'm ordering anything, any camera equipment, I'll throw in an SD card in there because it doesn't hurt having too many of those. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And like I say, you're going to buy blanks, get them from B&H. You want to buy them programmed, get them from Scanner Master.
All right, let's continue on. All right, so this is a neat website for reformatting SD cards. Now, of course, you can do it on a Windows machine directly by right-clicking on it when it creates an icon, or when you go into the device manager and you see that particular folder is available for that SD card. You would right-click on it, and then you could format it. The other alternative is one of these SD memory card formatters, Rich. Tell us a little bit about this.
So this is a Windows or Macintosh program that will reformat and restore SD cards. A lot of people swear by this. Personally, I have had no problem using Windows to reformat the SD card and then use Sentinel to rebuild it. But if you have issues with the SD card, you have bad sectors or other type issues, you can use this formatter program, and it's free. It's a free download. It works on a Mac, works on Windows. You can format the card with the SD card formatter program, and then open it in Sentinel to do the clear user data function in order to do the programming and setup for your particular radio. So, again, I haven't had a problem with the Windows doing it directly, but other people have, and this SD card program does work. I've used it as well.
So sdcard.org is the website to bookmark it. And you can see here that I basically, when I took the screenshot, I basically pressed on the downloads, and then this pop-up came up, for downloading. As you can see here, as Rich just mentioned, download for Windows, download for Mac. So either way, you have an option to be able to install this on either operating system.
Yep.
All right, so let's take another look at a next slide. This here is the key thing. Once let's say you had a corrupt SD card, or you bought a brand spanking new SD card. Now you're going to want to go to your Sentinel software. If you're running on either the Home Patrol 1 or 2, you're going to go to that Sentinel software. If you're running anything else, 536, 436, SDS 100, and 200, you're going to go over to the other, and you're going to want to clear user data.
Yeah.
Now, this is going to allow you to set up that card so it'll be formatted with those folders, so it'll line up so it's ready to go. Now, the other thing, before you finish, let's say you're using this and you're putting this to an SDS 100. Before you write to the radio, there's another tab over there, which you can have it so it'll format into the even more so for the targeted radio. So that may be one other thing that you may want to do.
Yeah. So make sure you set your target radio. If you've got a 436 or 536, it's the same. You got an SDS 100, select that, or 200, select that. On the Brown Sentinel for the Home Patrol, I don't think there is that option because it's not necessary. But on the X36 software, there is that target radio model. Now, with that being said, other than the firmware update, it's still going to work. You can take an SD card out an SDS 100 and put it into a 536. It's going to work. What you're not going to have is you're not going to have some of the display options because they have set properly because the displays are different. But those SD cards are compatible with each other. But that clear user data, basically what it does is it sets that card up for use in the radio that you've selected. It writes the basic files to the card so that the radio would recognize the card. You're still going to have to write the database in your favorites list to it and update your firmware if your firmware does need updating.
That is absolutely correct. So those are all things that you got to keep in mind with the SD cards when making new SD cards. So definitely keep that in mind. So let's continue on with the presentation here. And I think that is about it. We are pretty much done with it. We do have a few questions and comments, which we've been collecting over the broadcast. So we're going to dive into those. We're going to take a brief break here where we're going to just go over a few slides, and then we'll dive into part 2 of the broadcast. We're also going to talk to Rich about his experience at the NASCAR race just this past weekend. So keep it right here. We're going to do a few slides. So let's do that right now. So you want to make sure you tune in next week. We're getting into the holiday season. We're going to have our suggestions for holiday gift ideas for 2021. And we may even do a segment, the must-have accessories for this holiday season. So we're going to go over that as well in our next week's broadcast. Make sure you tune in. This is a must tune in for all of our viewers. If you're watching on Roku, Apple TV, certainly download the app, the YouTube app, and you can watch it on the big screen. Amazon Fire Stick, make sure you download that as well on your YouTube app on there as well, so you can watch us live on your TV. So next week's broadcast will be Wednesday, November the 17th, 2021, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. Don't go to the lobby because we still got some great information there, Joe. I see your comment. See, we do read your comments real time. And let's continue on. So we've got a great broadcast coming up on the Train Aficionado YouTube channel. We actually may have another interview. I'm working on the details right now with that, and we'll probably announce that if it happens on December the 6th. We'll announce that probably next week. So we're looking forward to another great Train Aficionado live show. If you're into trains or you're remotely interested into it, definitely subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So definitely subscribe to the Train Aficionado live channel. Follow, like, and subscribe to our social media as well over there, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at Train Aficionado. So definitely mark your calendar, set a reminder on your phone, Monday, December the 6th, 2021, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. And we can't thank enough. Our sponsor for this evening's show is Scanner Master. Since 1978, the nation's most experienced dealer of all brands of new police scanner software and accessories and programming. You can buy those SD cards directly from Scanner Master if you're looking for a replacement. Shop them online 24/7. Call the experts at 1-800-722-6637. Open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Shop them online, scannermaster.com. Email scannermaster at support@scannermaster.com. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube is their social media, so definitely follow them at Scannermaster Co. So we've got a great show coming up next week, so definitely tune in. We're looking forward to it as well. The other thing that we mentioned, which we didn't really do it during the slideshow presentation, is having an extra SD card. We probably talk about that 900 times during other shows. And yeah. Rich, as always, will show he's got an extra SD card taped on the back of his battery cover.
Yeah. That every handheld scanner that I have, the SDS 100, the 436, my home patrols, all have an SD card taped on the inside of the battery cover. And on my 536 out in the car, I do keep an SD card in the car. That way, you're guaranteed never to need it. But the one day that you leave home without it, you're going to need it.
I've been there, done that. I was on a camping trip up in New Hampshire. I had the SDS 200, actually 100, yep. Excuse me, 100. And I was sitting by the campfire, and I thought I turned the scanner off. So I went to go switch out the battery because I had an extra battery. So I popped the door off, put the new battery in. I had an SD card error because it didn't shut down properly. Yeah. So then I didn't have a laptop with me, so that scanner was basically useless for the weekend.
Yeah, I've been there and done that, and I had to drive halfway to Wichita without the 536 working until I got that SD card reformatted when I got there. And since then, I've done this, and I have not needed one. So. It's like I said, it's an insurance policy. If you don't have it, you're going to need it. And if you have it, you're never going to need it.
That's for sure. So we are going to kind of break out of our format tonight. So we're going to talk a little bit, and then at the top of the hour, we will address the questions, which we have. We have them lined up. Our producer is actually putting those all together on the screen for us. So we are looking forward to answering those questions. The great thing about our show is, we get to go and experience things. And sometimes, we get to go out in the field and try things out with scanners. This is not unusual, but Rich doesn't typically go out to NASCAR races, but he was able to go this weekend. Our good friend and viewer, and it was a guest on the Scanner Guys show. Yep. Dale Osborne asked Rich to go to the race. So how did this all come about, Rich?
Well, it basically he had an extra ticket for the NASCAR race, which was out here in Phoenix. I don't know, 55 miles away from my house, and I happened to be free that day, and so and he was coming down here for the race, so I went down and picked him up, and he and his grandson and I went down to the race, which was in the south part of the valley, and we had a great time. I had never been to a NASCAR race. I'd been to an IndyCar race. I'd been to some short track stuff in the past with my buddy Scott, but I'd never been to a NASCAR race. It was fascinating. And he has one of those racing electronics scanners, the RE3000, I think it is. And he had that and he's got a fantastic rig. Now, he's a diehard NASCAR guy. He goes to a lot of races. And so he's all prepared. There's a box about yay big, and it's got plugins for, I think, up to 4 headsets. And he had 3 headsets, one for each of us, which not only allows us to listen to the scanner, but it's an intercom between the 3 of us. And it also blocks out most of the noise. Now, we were sitting 14 rows up from the track. We can count the hair on the driver's eyelids. We were that close, and it was really loud. And with those headsets, it really made it, much more enjoyable because your ears and your head isn't throbbing for that noise. And plus, we were able to talk back and forth, and most importantly, able to hear not only his scanner but also the 125 that I brought with me. And I had it set up on close call for a while. And then I had it set up on the NASCAR track officials channel while he had his scanner set to the driver's channels. And that was a really neat setup, and it really made it much more enjoyable. The fact that we were able to communicate back and forth, listen to the race operations, and to the drivers. It really worked out well. If you go there to one of these big races, Racing Electronics sells these frequency sheets. But if you've got one of these RE3000 radios, it'll automatically be programmed over the air when you arrive on station for the track. And they have a transmitter. The radio receives that data, reprograms itself for the frequencies on the race, so you can see what the card numbers are and what the drivers' names are. It really is a slick operation. And if you're a big NASCAR fan, it is a worthwhile investment. And it really was a lot of fun. I had the close call going, and I found a bunch of the data channels and a bunch of the non-NASCAR channels, track operations and some other operations. But during the race, I was listening to the NASCAR track officials, and the starter was, 20 yards from us. We were right there at the start line, and it really I was amazed at how clear the audio sounded with that radio and my radio and those headsets. It really was very clear and easy to hear and listen to. And the company was great, and we had a great time, the 3 of us. The food was expensive. The lines were long. It took us a while to get in and get out. Whenever you go to an event like that, a NASCAR race, IndyCar race, or any big event, be prepared to be patient. It took us, 45 minutes once we got off the freeway and got in line to get into the parking lot. Then it was a 10-minute walk from the parking lot to the track. It only took us a couple minutes to get in through ticketing and security, and we walked around the pits. We did all that stuff, had a great time doing that. And then it took us probably close to an hour just to get out of the parking lot and there. But the suburban and county police that were involved, both Maricopa and Pinal counties, had their sheriff's departments out there. The city, I think Avondale and Goodyear and Phoenix police were all there. And they had it down to a science. It really was very well organized as far as that kind of stuff. The track people obviously know what they're doing. They do this for a living. They do it all the time. It was well organized. It was enjoyable. We had a great time.
I was originally going to ask you questions in this segment, but you just took off with it.
Answered all your questions before you had a chance to ask them.
So you see a lot of we'll banter a little bit. You don't need to. You see a lot of people at the race. They have no scanner. Now you see when you're listening at the race, you're getting the behind the scenes story, especially if you're following one particular driver. When I went to the race, I was a fan of Carl Edwards. So I had both his primary and secondary channel tuned into the scanner. He's no longer driving. He's retired.
Okay. So that means he won't be on the list.
No, he won't be on the list. I would definitely watch if he was back driving. But so, you would actually hear what was going on. And then the other great thing it was before they did the stage racing, I'm not a fan of the stage racing. A lot of NASCAR fans are not. It used to be a fuel mileage race, depending on where you pit. You may be running on fumes going over the checkered line. And I remember, his crew chief, Bob Osborne, not related to Dale, I don't think, when he was driving for Roush Fenway, he knew he was running out of fuel, and he would tell him, crank up that track bar all the way up, because literally he's trying to get every drop of gas in the engine as much as possible. But yeah, I mean, I've heard a whole bunch of things. It was really fun to listen to each and every week. If you're not at the race next year, you may want to sign up through NASCAR's website. They have a online scanner which you can watch the TV and listen to the scanner, either scanning all the drivers or scanning your favorite driver, and you can hear the scanner audio while you're watching on TV, almost like you're there. But I can't imagine, I've been to several races, and I can't imagine going to a race without listening to that behind the scenes. All you're doing is just watching them go around and around and around. I mean,
and then the occasional crash, and the scanner really made it worthwhile. It really was. And you're right. You got to see the behind the scenes activity going on. And it was fascinating listening to these guys talk about the stuff. There were times when we were scanning a bunch of drivers, and there were times we keyed in on one specific driver. And hearing the back and forth between the drivers and his crew really made you understand some of the nuances behind it. They were telling him, okay, you got this guy, this guy, this guy. Hey, there's a crash in turn 3. Keep to the left, or keep to the right. That kind of banter back and forth. And I'm hearing the stuff on the scanner, and then I automatically look, hey, he's right. There is a crash there. And I would not have known about it, until, later without having heard it on the scanner. So the same reason why you would listen to the police and fire and the railroads and stuff on the scanner elsewhere on a big event like that, especially on a NASCAR event where not only do they tolerate scanners, which a lot of places wouldn't, they encourage it and they make a business out of it. You can rent the scanners. You can buy the scanners from their hauler at the race. You can buy the frequency sheet if you have your own scanner. And if you have one of their scanners, it automatically loads the programming. It can't get any easier than that. It's not cheap, but it's not prohibitively expensive. I mean, it's about to buy one of those radios. It's about the cost of 2 tickets to go into the track, So it's worthwhile investment if you go there all the time.
If you already have the scanner, like a 125 AT, which has the PL tone, which all those on that list, it doesn't show the PL tone. And my biggest tip to anybody that's listening to a couple of drivers, program your 125 AT, put it in PL search. And then what it'll do, as soon as you hear those familiar voices, it'll pop up with the PL, and then you just store it. As simple as that.
Yeah, and like I said, the advantage of their radios is that it's programmed over the air for you, and you don't have to sit there and program all these frequencies in there. And it'll show the car number. It'll show, and it's a lot easier to do that because you don't really know what the frequencies are going to be until race day anyway. And I think part of the reason why they don't put that information out ahead of time is so that you are more likely to buy or rent one of their radios, or at least buy their frequency sheet. But it is a remarkable operation, and it really does make it more enjoyable. And I'm glad that they've embraced the use of scanners and have created some of the technology to make that worthwhile. And as far as some of the other questions pop up, not a lot of sunburn. I do have some redness on the back of my neck. I wore a hat. I live in Arizona. I know how to take care of it. But the other thing, too, is the design of the racetrack. The racetrack is built into some of the hills out there. And they built it with the grandstand and such to the west, because most of the races are in the afternoon, and it blocks that afternoon sun. So you're not sitting there baking in the sun while you're sitting in the stands. So I mean, they thought ahead about this when they built that. Otherwise, in Phoenix, even in November, it gets that sun will burn you to a crisp, and that helps. So out here, we always wear a hat when we're outside. We always have sunglasses, and we take care of things before you go out in the sun. You learn that real quick. Is the RE3000 programmed with the CT, CSS, and the PL and DPLs? I'm assuming that they are. Dale, you'll know the answer to that question for sure. I'm assuming it was, because I heard no interference in intermod coming through that radio.
Yeah, I probably would say that's a yes, because
it is. Dale says so.
If you run the scanner wide open, so if you go in with like an old 75 or that 30 scanner, which I can't think of.
SR30C,
yeah, SR30C. We talk about the 125 AT, so I don't even consider that one.
Yeah.
So there's no PL tone, so you run into PL tone and DPL. This is one place where it is handy to have it.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's definitely a key thing, to have it on the radio. So definitely keep that in mind. We're at the top of the hour right now, about 2 minutes past the hour. So welcome to the show. In case you're just joining the broadcast, we're the Scanner Guys. We were talking about SD cards. This video will be available on our YouTube channel, the Scanner Guys. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can see all of our videos. We would appreciate that. So we're going to dive into the Q&A questions of the broadcast. We'll start right at the top of the sheet, Rich, and work our way down. So William had a question. Let's take a look at that one, Rich.
All right. So he says a funny thing. He never received the newsletter. He went to look on the page, tried to join, and it says your email is already in there. So
we don't send emails all the time. So we don't spam you like some other places. So we occasionally send emails. So definitely be on the lookout. We should be sending one relatively soon. So definitely be on the lookout for that. We'll be sending one soon. So make sure you check your spam or bulk mail email box, because it could end up there. We will let you know the next broadcast if you received the email message.
John asked, what size micro SD card do you recommend, 8 or 32? We did talk about this little bits and pieces earlier and after the question was posed. 8, if you're not doing recording, then the smaller cards are fine. They are getting kind of hard to find, though. Most of the time when you go into the store, the minimum size card you're going to find these days usually is a 32 or a 64. So you may have to go online to get smaller capacity cards. You can sometimes find pretty decent deals on them, but remember to be careful where you buy commodity items like this from. You want to make sure you get it from a reputable dealer, and you get reputable cards. Buy name brand SD cards. I personally, unless you need the excessive recording space and are prepared to have some possible issues, I wouldn't go over 32 gigs. If you've got a Whistler, keep it as small as possible, because it does take forever for those cards to load up on a Whistler scanner. All right. So Jerome says he's got a unit in Home Patrol 2, and the SD card apparently went corrupt. He's got to buy a new car. He bought a new card, and it's now fixed. But what did this happen? So, again, we talked about this a little bit after that question was posed. If you have the recording feature or the replay feature turned on, turn it off unless you actually use that feature. 99% of the SD card corruption is because the radio was set to record, and when the power was killed or the battery died, the radio hadn't finished writing those files, and a corrupted file got on there, and that's the end of that SD card. What's going to happen to unit and scanners when they're no longer going to find the small SD cards? Yeah, 2 and 4 gig cards are hard to find anywhere. 8 gig cards are a little bit easier to find. We obviously still source them at ScannerMaster. You can get those. And I think 8 gigs is kind of like the ideal size of SD cards for scanners.
Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of times, some photographers, sometimes for me, I'd rather have, like a 16 gig SD card. I don't want to go to the ridiculous monstrosity of an SD card because this kind of forces you to go and empty the SD card versus, taking endless and endless and endless photography. And then guess what happens, Rich? If you've got 3 years worth of photography and you corrupt that SD card, poof, everything goes. So the smaller SD cards for me as a photographer allows you to be able to dump it onto a secure hard drive that's not going to have any issues. But I hope that a lot of photographers are like that, so they'll keep manufacturing these smaller SD cards. But I haven't seen an issue with the 8. The ones like he said, the 2 and the 4 gigs are not really available unless Uniden said to SanDisk, hey, manufacture 2 and 4 gigs, we'll buy them all, unless they have a special deal with them.
I think Uniden guarantees a minimum of 4 gig card being delivered with the current scanners. I think the Home Patrol 1 came with the 2 gig, and the Home Patrol 2 started out with 4. And I think I've seen some of the Uniden scanners current come with 4 and 8. So they say they're going to provide you with a 4 gig card, but they provide you an 8. Hey, that's bonus time. But if they say they're going to provide you an 8 and they end up with a 4, well, now you're getting ripped off. So, yeah, I think they specify that they're going to give you a 4, but sometimes you might get an 8, which is fine. That's great. Again, unless you're doing recording, there's no reason to get anything larger than 8 other than they might be harder to find. But go to B&H or buy a program card from ScannerMaster, do a little bit of online searching, and you'll be able to find those smaller capacity cards. And eventually, maybe the 4s will no longer be available, and the minimum size you're going to find is an 8.
We get this question all the time, but this is an odd pairing in this question, Brian. The 325 versus the 536. Okay. I'm not too sure if you may have mistyped there. That's a handheld versus a base mobile. So I'm guessing that you meant the 436. So the 436 versus the 325 P2. You're looking at clean slate scanner being the 325 P2 versus the 436, which is a database scanner. So if that's going to be a big decision maker, whether you want to go clean slate or full database. Now, the biggest beefs on the 325, if we're going to be fair to it, is the battery doesn't have long life because it only has 2 batteries, where the 436 has 3 batteries. The thing with that radio is it's trying to do digital and everything, and that kind of sucks down the battery quite a bit. And trunking. Trunking is a big battery sucker. So if you're going to be using this radio as a portable lot on batteries and you don't mind the database, do the 436. If you're looking for something small and compact and it's always going to be plugged in, the 325 is a great unit, but you're going to have to program it for the areas in which you're looking to monitor. Because, as always, that's a clean slate scanner. You're not going to pull it out of the box and it'll start working. With the 436, you can either punch in a zip code or take the time to download the Sentinel software and create a favorites list there, or multiple favorites lists. So that's basically the differences in between the two. Personal preference, database versus clean slate. And then if you're one of the hangups with the 325 is battery life. So if you're not too concerned about battery life and you're looking for that small, compact, fit in your shirt pocket, the 325 is the best. 436 is a larger radio. So it feels like a two-way radio essentially.
Yeah, and the 325 is normally my go-to radio when I do things like go to the mall or go to an event, because I can do DMR, NXDN, P25 or analog with it. And you're right, it's that small, compact form factor. I always throw a couple extra AA batteries in my pocket.
Me too.
Yeah, even if I take the 436 out, I very rarely have to change them on the 436. But on a 325, I've been out there for a few hours. I'm throwing some new batteries in there.
So Jerome has got another question for us, asking about the SDS 200. And Rich and I both agree with that Ethernet jack. Well, two things with an Ethernet jack. And we were talking to Bearcat Joe. I think we've talked to him about this as well in the past. And we asked him, what was the thought process on that? And he said, I think, unfortunately, the design phase was already done before, beta testers had any input.
Yeah.
And, one thing with that, it's upside down. So you have to wedge something in to pop out the Ethernet jack. And two, why is it in the front? We both agree. I don't know, but
I don't know. And the powers that be weren't able to provide such an answer when we asked it. So, yeah, you're right. It should have gone on the back. But for whatever reason, it's there where it is. And I always have to take something small like a little pocket knife blade in order to take the Ethernet connection out because it's too close to the knob. So, yeah, that's a design flaw that unfortunately was unable to be rectified.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, we kind of mentioned, what was the thought process behind doing this? It's just, it's just, unfortunately, it's something that we couldn't catch. Todd has a question for you, Rich. This British, it's a UK format trunking system, right?
Well, European.
Yeah.
And the MPT 1327, there are some in use here in the U.S. Wisconsin, I know, has got a couple systems here and there. So it's not common here in the States, but there are some operations out there. But in order to follow those systems, you would have to have a Tate or Kenwood radio, like Dale mentioned right after that. You would have to have a two-way, basically a two-way radio set up to scan those systems. So no scanners or consumer grade radios will do that format. It's just not worth it to Uniden or Whistler to do the R&D necessary to create one of those radios, just because there's just not enough call for it. There's so few systems here in the States. There are more systems like that in Europe, but that's not here. So,
okay, William, we get this question all the time. It's another question about the 325P2. What software do you use to program the radio? We have a partnership at Scannermaster with Butel Software, so we highly recommend Butel Software. If you're looking at their catalog of software, it's the ARC-XT. That radio, among a whole bunch of other radios, the counterpart of the current P2 radio, which is the 996P2, can use the same exact software. So if you have the 325 and the 996P2, you can have them exactly the same. The same thing with any of the XT radios, the 996XT, the 396 XT, the 15X, and the old 346 XT.
Yeah.
So
people forget about that radio.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's kind of like the portable version of the 15X. So now, with that being said, if you've got an older 396T or a 996T, it will not work with the XT software, and you'll have to use specific software for those radios. There are other software programs out there as well that'll work on it, but the XT is obviously the one that we're going to suggest for you.
That's for sure, and I think that's all of our comments that we ran into.
There was a comment at 7 after on the second page of our doc here.
Oh yeah, so oops, I missed that one. Oh yeah, there's more comments. Hold on one second. I didn't see that there. Okay.
Yeah, we got so many comments that went to a second page.
Yeah, went to a second page. I'll pull that up, Rich, if you want to start talking about Joe M's.
Yeah, so I wonder if a faster card will have less of the corruption issue. Possibly. So if you get a faster card and there's a read-write speed that the cards will often be have, and if you can't find it written on the card, you can usually find it on the documentation that comes with the card. But if you get a card that does have a faster read-write speed, you may have a lower possibility of corruption because the data can be written to the card quicker and it's less likely to be interrupted when the power is removed from the radio impolitely. So, yeah, it can help it. How much of a difference it's going to make is probably not particularly measurable, though.
Oh boy, here we go again. Another comparison. The 436 versus the TRX1.
Yeah.
All right, here's my beefs with the TRX1. The digital audio is pretty loud, but the analog audio is low on the TRX1. That's one of the things that I found. So if you're in an area where there's a mixed bag of analog and digital, you may want to go 436 in this direction. The TRX1 is definitely a pretty decent radio, works very well on digital. It does have its drawbacks. It doesn't have, it's not able to handle DMR or next edge trunking.
Right.
And if you're in an area where it so happens to have pro voice, it's not able to do that at all. Right. On the 436, those three, DMR, Pro Voice, and NextEdge, are paid upgrades. Now, the reason behind the TRX is the TRX 1 and 2 don't have that as a paid upgrade because they didn't do the full license of the whole kit and caboodle. Be able to do DMR and NextEdge conventional and DMR and NextEdge trunking. So they kind of fabricated, what licensing they had to do into the cost of the radio. On the Uniden side, they want you to be able to do it all, be able to follow conventional and trunking. And a vast majority of these DMR and NextEdge systems are trunking.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of them are. Now, with that being said, there are some conventional systems out there or single channel trunked, where there's one frequency. They may have multiple talk groups, but there's only one frequency. That's pretty common in a shopping mall. Security be on talk group number 1 and housekeeping on talk group number 2, but yet there's only one frequency. But yeah, you're right. If you want to do trunking, get the Uniden. If you're conventional, you might save a few dollars by getting the Whistler. And the rest of it is going to be a Ford versus Chevy type of argument. Or what's better, pink or green? It's a personal choice. If you're used to Uniden scanners, you're going to like the 436, and you're going to be lost in a TRX. And the same thing, if you've been using Radio Shack or GREs or Whistlers for years, somebody puts a 436 in your hand, you're going to say, it's like hopping into a car you've never driven before. You can't find the turn signal lever.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good thing about that is it's personal preference. I've used the TRX-1 and the 436. That's my only concern with the TRX is the audio low on the analog. That's because it's got that
digital
smaller
sounds great.
speaker. Oh yeah, and the digital's loud.
Yeah,
but the analog is very quiet, and that's one of my beasts. When I was in Massachusetts, it's a mix of digital and analog, and in some areas it's more analog than digital. So I'm like, I can't really hear this too well. So this is not gonna be my daily runner of a radio because I want to be able to hear that analog pretty loud.
Yeah.
Bearcat Joe had a comment and actually a tip for those that are using the SDS 200, the LAN cable. Buy a 90-degree adapter so you can unplug the cable easier. So the tab will not be located directly under the knob. Yeah. Bearcat Joe, that's a great suggestion for any of you guys out there. We really do appreciate that, Bearcat Joe. So if you are using that landline, that may be a best thing to do. And I'm sure they have them at the big box store online. Amazon probably sells them, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've used right angle cables, but you still have that issue with the tab being underneath the knob, the squelch knob. But with that adapter, number one, it gets that cable pointing away from the radio. Make sure that right angle goes to the right direction, either down or better off to the right, so that you can then have the cable pointing the right direction so that's not in the way of everything else. And you leave that adapter in there, and you never have to worry about trying to find something small to stick in there to release the tab.
Dave came in with a quick question here. He's seeing this a lot on the forums and such about the heat of the radios, Rich.
Yeah. They do use lithium polymer batteries, and any battery when it's being recharged can get warm. If the radio, apparently the SDS 100 has a safety feature that will stop the charging if it detects that the battery is too warm or too hot when it's charging. There are alternatives to charging the battery within the radio on the SDS 100, and we sell that.
Charger
is the external charger. Mine is in the other room right now, but it's a little square box, about yay big, with the cable coming out of it and a wall plug, and the battery just fits right on that top of that charger, and you can charge it outside the radio, so that if the battery does get too warm, it's not going to damage your radio. And if you have a second battery, you can charge one battery while using the other, and it will work with both the small and the large battery because the battery just drops into the top of it. And Scanner Master is the only retailer that you can buy this small battery and battery door. So if you go to scannermaster.com, you can buy the small battery with a small battery door, so that on your SDS 100, you don't have this big thing sticking out the back of your radio. And I actually do have mine on there right now. So you have the small flat battery, and versus having the great big one. So yeah, the battery's not going to last as long, but if you're only out there for a short while, or you have the battery with you. The other thing you can do too is if you use a smaller battery and you have this large battery door, you can put some stuffing in there, folded up piece of cardboard, to keep the small battery taut if you have the small battery and the big battery door. Little pro tip.
Now, the other thing that we always mention with portable radios, and we can't stress enough, is carrying cases. Carrying cases are definitely key. When Rich and I were working on design specs on this particular carrying case, you can see towards the rear of the radio, there's some vent holes. This is in case, it does get a little bit warm. It's got some ventilation on both sides. So this is the carrying case here. And of course, you can see those vent holes there as well. So definitely, if you're in the market, we're going to talk about this next week in detail, how important it is to get a carrying case for your scanner, especially when you have the SDS. It's an expensive radio. And if you're going to be carrying it on your hip or even just carrying it around from the vehicle to the house, put a carrying case on it. It's going to protect that radio and keep it looking brand new on the outside.
Yeah, it'd be the best $30 you ever spent.
That's for sure. I think that wraps it up for our questions this evening. We're going to wrap up things. Is there anything else that you want to add, Rich, before we?
No, I think I'm good, my friend.
All right. So we want to remind you that next week's show is going to be a good one. We're getting right into the holiday season here at Scanner Master, of course, and we are as well at the show. So we're going to have some great programming coming up for the remainder of November and December. But next week's show, we're going to talk about holiday gift ideas. So you're looking to get something for a special someone, a new scanner, or you're looking for a gift for yourself. We're going to have a great discussion about holiday gifts for 2021. We're going to talk about that in detail. Make sure you check us out on Roku or Apple TV or Amazon. You can download the app on any of those devices for YouTube, and you can watch us on the big screen. Next week's broadcast will be Wednesday, November the 17th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, right here live on our YouTube channel. So make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're watching the show for the first time. Subscribe to us on YouTube. We would love to see that. Definitely give the video a thumbs up as well. And we would love to see you join our family right here on YouTube. And if you're a viewer of the Train Aficionado live show, just set a reminder on your phone. Wednesday, December the 6th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be live again on the Train Aficionado live show. We hope to have a guest on there. It will be an interesting show. I'm just working on that right now. Follow, like, and subscribe to our social media there, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at Train Aficionado. Definitely check out the website as well. Hope to have some blog entries and such. And don't forget, while you're here watching the video, if there's any Scanner Master products that you would like to purchase, hit that affiliate link down below. That will help us improve the channel even more. I mean, there's a lot of cost to being able to do this. We have our streaming service, which we use, and we also have our website and such, which has annual billing and such, and that helps us to keep those things up and running. So make sure you hit that affiliate link if you're looking to purchase anything from Scanner Master. Follow, like, and subscribe to our social media as well at at the Scanner Guys. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at the Scanner Guys. Check out the website, scannerguyshow.com. And then you can, of course, check out our store and our newsletter on our website. So many great things happening there. So definitely check that out. So it should be a great show next Monday. I probably said Wednesday by accident. Monday, December the 6th. I think the slide was correct. And of course, I said the wrong thing. So Monday, December the 6th will be the Train Aficionado live show. And of course, the Scanner Guys are on every Wednesday night. We want to make sure that, that we emphasize that. I mean, it'd be kind of hard for you and I to be hosting two shows on two separate channels at the same time.
Well, we could try it. It might be a little interesting. One thing to remember: tomorrow is Veterans Day. And not only is it Chris's birthday, but it's also Veterans Day. So please make sure you honor our veterans and all the sacrifices that they made. And remember that the Scanner Master phones will be offline tomorrow because of the holiday. Our website will be open all day, of course. If you have any problems or questions, please give us a call on Friday, and we will certainly answer them. Or you can send an email.
Yeah, you can always send an email to support at scannermaster.com. That's support at scannermaster.com. And as always, we are still looking for shack photos. We hope to do another shack show by the end of the year. So definitely send us your shack photos. You can email that, thescannerguys@gmail.com, thescannerguys@gmail.com for all that. Is there anything else we should add before we wrap it up?
I think I'm good, my friend.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining Rich and I. We had a great time doing this show. We'll have another great show coming up next week. I'm Jonathan Higgins.
I'm Rich Carlson.
Until next week, we'll see you again right back here on the Skinner Guys.
Later, guys.